Snow was falling as I pulled my old truck into the driveway. The houses on the street were glowing with Christmas lights. Families were gathering inside. Laughter carried through the cold night. For me, this year was supposed to be no different. I carried 2 bags of groceries into the kitchen. I had planned to cook a turkey, the same way Maria used to do when she was alive. She had a recipe for sage stuffing that everyone loved. I could never match her touch, but cooking it always made me feel close to her. As I set the bags down, my phone buzzed. It was Michael, my son. I smiled as I answered. I expected to hear him say when I should come over. I expected him to ask what I could bring. Instead, his voice was heavy. "Dad, I don't think it's a good idea if you come over for Christmas this year." I froze. "What do you mean, not a good idea?" There was silence. Then he spoke again. His tone was low and uneasy. "Isabella's parents are coming. They think it would be complicated if you were here. You understand, right?" The grocery bag slipped from my hand. Apples rolled across the floor. The word stayed in my head. Complicated, as if a father at his own son's table was a burden. "Michael, I have spent every Christmas with you since you were born. Why am I not welcome now?" He did not answer right away. I heard him shift like he always did when he was hiding the truth. "It is just easier this way, Dad. You know how her family is. They have their own traditions. Maybe we could do something the weekend after." The weekend after. Like Christmas could be delayed. Like it was just another meeting to move around. I looked around my own house. The curtains were old. The porch light flickered. The couch had springs poking through. I had not fixed any of it. Every extra dollar had gone into his home. The new floors, the modern kitchen, the polished furniture. My money was in every corner of that house, and now I was not welcome in it. I swallowed hard. "I see. Well then, tell Isabella's parents Merry Christmas." Before he could answer, I ended the call. The silence in the house felt heavier than the snow outside. I stared at the bag on the floor. The cranberries had rolled out. Maria always said Christmas was not complete without cranberries. Now they lay scattered on the linoleum, bright red against the dull floor. I bent down and picked them up one by one. Each berry felt like a memory, each one a reminder of what I had given and of what had been taken from me. That night I sat in the dark kitchen. I did not cook the turkey. I did not make the stuffing. I waited for the phone to ring again. It never did. By midnight I understood. My son had not only uninvited me from Christmas, he had uninvited me from his life. And in that silence another thought began to take shape. If I was not welcome in the house I built for him, then maybe it was time to remind him who had built it in the first place. The next morning I woke early. The house was quiet, too quiet. I made myself a cup of black coffee and sat at the kitchen table. On the wall was Maria's photo. She was smiling the way she always did, warm, gentle. It felt like she was watching me. Michael's words came back again. "It is just easier this way, Dad. Easier." That word cut deep. My whole life I had made things easier for him. Now he was saying life was easier without me. I pushed the coffee aside and opened the drawer in the corner. Inside were old folders stacked with bills and bank papers. For years I had avoided looking at them, but today I wanted to see the truth. The first folder held the mortgage statements, page after page. Every month I had sent $2,800 for 5 years. Over $140,000 in total, enough to buy peace for myself, enough for a retirement. Instead, it went into the house that no longer welcomed me. Behind that folder were more papers. The down payment, $47,000, taken from the equity of my own home. I remembered the bank officer asking me if I was sure. He looked at me with pity. I had smiled then, proud, telling him it was for my son, for his future. Then came the receipts. Hardwood floors Isabella wanted. Granite countertops she said were essential. The mixer that cost $2,000. She used it twice. After that, it sat in a cupboard. Another stack showed the bills I paid when Michael lost his job, the power bill, the water bill, even groceries. I never hesitated. I told him, "Do not worry, son, I will cover it." That is what fathers do. All while his wife carried designer purses on her shoulder. I sat back and looked at the mountain of paper spread across the table. Each line told a story. I had not been a father in their eyes. I had been a bank, a quiet servant, invisible. I remembered one night years ago. Michael called me late. His voice cracked as he said he could not handle the pressure. The bills were too much. He was ashamed to admit it to Isabella. I told him not to worry. I said I would handle it, that I always would. I remembered Isabella walking me through their kitchen one afternoon. She held paint samples in her hand, talking as if I was a hired contractor, not her husband's father. She never thanked me, not once. And I told myself it did not matter. That love was enough. Maria's voice echoed in my memory. She once warned me, "Do not give too much, Dennis. One day they will forget it was ever yours to give." She had been right. I had not only given too much, I had given everything. My phone lit up on the table, Isabella's name on the screen. I did not answer. I already knew what she would say. Some excuse, some polished line about family traditions, maybe even another request. Always another request. I looked at the calculator Maria once used for our savings. I entered the numbers one by one. Mortgage, down payment, renovations, bills, groceries. The total rose higher and higher. When the last number appeared on the screen, I stared at it in silence. $237,468. That was the cost of my son's loyalty, the price of my own silence. I set the calculator down. My hands were steady. For years I had told myself sacrifice was love, but sacrifice without respect is not love. It is slavery, and I had been a slave long enough. Snow was falling outside, covering the street in white. I looked at Maria's photo and whispered, "You were right. It is time to stop." For the first time in years, I felt a shift inside me. Not sorrow, not regret, but strength. The weight of sacrifice had been heavy. Now I was ready to put it down. The days after that call felt like winter had settled inside me. The house was cold, even when the heater hummed. Every corner felt hollow without Maria's laughter, without the noise of family, without the sound of children running in the halls. I sat most nights in the living room chair. The television played, but I hardly noticed it. My eyes kept drifting to the photo frames on the wall. Old family pictures, Michael as a boy with a baseball glove, Maria in the garden with her hands full of roses, holidays when the table was full and the house smelled of cinnamon. Now the frames told a different story. Each year, Michael's smile grew more distant. Each year, Isabella moved closer to the center of the picture. My face seemed to shrink into the background until it looked like I was a guest in my own family. On Christmas Eve, I drove through the neighborhoods lit with glowing decorations. I slowed when I passed a house where a family was gathering at the window. The parents carried trays of food. Children pressed their noses against the glass, waiting for dinner to start. Their faces glowed with joy. It should have warmed me. Instead, it felt like a blade. That was once my life. When I pulled back into my own driveway, the porch light flickered weakly above me. I had not fixed it because every spare dollar had gone into Michael's home. I stood there a long moment before stepping inside. The silence of the house wrapped around me like a punishment. I tried to cook that night. I pulled out the turkey and set it on the counter. I chopped onions and celery for the stuffing. Maria's recipe was written in her neat handwriting on a faded card. I read the first line again and again, but the words blurred. My hands would not move. I pushed everything back into the fridge and sat down at the table. The phone buzzed once. Isabella's name appeared. I turned it face down without answering. I knew what her voice would sound like. Sweet on the surface, sharp underneath. Excuses. About her parents. Polite words, hiding the truth that I was not good enough for their company. I stared at the phone until the light went dark. Then I stared at Maria's empty chair across from me. That was the hardest part. She would have known what to say. She would have reminded me that family is not proven by the size of a house or the shine of a countertop. It is proven by love and respect. The clock struck midnight. I whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear it. "Merry Christmas, Maria." The words echoed in the still air. No reply, only the hum of the refrigerator. That night I understood something clear. I was living in exile, not because I had left my family, but because they had chosen to leave me. And in that exile I began to feel something new, a quiet resolve, a seed planted deep. They had shut me out, but I was not finished. The morning after Christmas, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The snow outside had turned to ice. The streets were silent. For the first time in years, I did not have to plan how much money would disappear from my account that week. The feeling was strange, almost like freedom. At 10 o'clock the phone rang. Isabella's name lit up the screen. I let it ring once, twice. By the fourth ring, I answered. "Dennis," she said with that tone she always used, sweet on the surface, sharp underneath. "We need you to pick up my parents from the airport. Their flight lands at 2. You are the only one with time." I held the phone to my ear and said nothing for a moment. Less than 24 hours ago, she had told my son that I was not welcome in their home. Now she expected me to play chauffeur for her parents. "Did you forget our conversation yesterday?" I asked. She gave a short laugh. "Oh, that. Let us not dwell on misunderstandings. My parents need a ride. You have the truck. It is family duty." Her words sank in. Family duty. That was the rope they had tied around my neck for years. Family duty meant I paid their bills. Family duty meant I worked so they could rest. Family duty meant I gave while they took. "Isabella," I said slowly, "you told me I was not worthy to sit at your Christmas table, yet you want me to carry your parents' bags." There was a pause. I could hear her tapping her nails. On the counter, probably the granite one I had paid for. "You are being dramatic," she said. "My parents expect someone who knows how to handle luggage. Please wear that blue shirt you wore at Michael's graduation. They notice things like that." She hung up before I could answer. I set the phone down on the table. The silence of the house seemed louder than her voice. For a long time I did not move. Then I stood, walked to the drawer, and pulled out the folder of bank statements again. Each page was a record of what I had given, every payment a step further into their control. Looking at it now, I felt something shift inside me. Anger, yes, but also clarity. For years I had let them decide who I was. I was the provider, the helper, the one who stayed quiet, the one who sacrificed. But in that moment I realized the truth. Respect is not given to the man who never says no. Respect is given to the man who knows when enough is enough. I picked up my phone again. I called the bank. When the operator answered, I spoke with a calm voice I had not used in years. "I need to cancel an automatic transfer," I said. The woman asked for my account details. I gave them. She typed on her keyboard. "Yes, sir," she said. $2,800 monthly to Wells Fargo. Do you want to cancel effective immediately?" I looked around my kitchen. At the old appliances I had never replaced, at the porch light I had not fixed, at the coat still hanging by the door because I could not afford another one. "Yes," I said, "effective immediately." The operator confirmed it. The payment was gone. 5 years of sacrifice ended with one simple call. I set the phone down. The silence in the room felt different now, not heavy, not lonely, clean. For the first time in years, the money I earned would stay in my pocket. For the first time since Maria passed away, I felt like I was living for myself. The breaking point had come, and I had chosen. The day after I cancelled the payments, I woke with a strange calm. The sun broke through the window and filled the kitchen with light. For the first time in years, I poured myself a cup of coffee without calculating how much money would be gone by the end of the week. The quiet felt new. It did not feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like space, a space I could finally fill with my own choices. The phone rang again. Isabella's number. I let it ring until it stopped. A message appeared a minute later. It was long, full of polite words that hid sharp edges. She wrote that family must support each other, that Michael was under stress, that I needed to do the right thing and restart the transfers. I deleted it without replying. That evening I opened the folder of papers once more. Bank statements, receipts, old checks, each one a reminder of how much I had given. I stacked them carefully on the table. Then I added something new, a notebook. I wrote down dates, amounts, notes on every sacrifice. By the time I finished, the notebook was half full. Looking at the evidence, I felt no regret, only clarity. They had built their lives on my back. They had laughed in the house I had paid for. They had excluded me from the table I had bought, and they believed I would keep carrying them forever. But I was done being their foundation. I thought about Maria. She always believed in quiet strength. She taught me that real power does not shout, it acts. Sitting in that kitchen, I understood her lesson in a way I never had before. If Isabella and her parents wanted to play their games, then I would play mine. But not with anger, with patience, with precision. I picked up the phone, not to call them, not to beg for a seat at their table. I called the bank again. I spoke to a clerk about closing credit lines linked to their accounts. I asked about shifting the last of my savings into a place they could not touch. Step by step I began to move the pieces. When I hung up, the house was silent again. But this time the silence did not feel empty. It felt like the pause before the storm. I walked to the mantel where Maria's photo stood. I looked at her face and whispered, "I am not their servant anymore. From now on, I am my own man." The decision was made, and once made, it could not be undone. It did not take long for them to notice. 3 days after I cancelled the payments, my phone began to ring without pause. First it was Michael, then Isabella, then her parents. I ignored every call. Each message sounded the same: concern at first, then irritation, then demands. By the end of the week, Isabella showed up at my door. She did not knock gently. She hammered at the wood until the frame rattled. When I opened the door, she pushed past me into the living room. Her voice was sharp. "Dennis, the mortgage company says the payment was not made. What happened?" I sat down in my chair, calm, steady. "What happened?" I said. "Is that I stopped paying." Her eyes widened. "You cannot just stop. Do you know what this means for Michael? For me? For our home?" I looked around my small house, at the cracked ceiling, at the worn carpet, at the furniture I had kept for decades. "I know exactly what it means. It means you finally have to live on your own, the way adults should." Her tone rose. "We trusted you. We counted on you. You cannot abandon us like this." I leaned forward. My voice stayed low. "I did not abandon you. I carried you for 5 years. I carried your mortgage, your bills, your comfort. While I sat here alone in silence, you excluded me from Christmas. You told my son I was not welcome at his own table. Now you want me to keep paying for the chair I am not allowed to sit in." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. For the first time she looked unsettled. Finally she said, "Michael does not need this stress. His job is demanding. His parents should support him." I shook my head. Parents should raise their children to stand on their own. I gave him that chance. I gave him more than most fathers ever could, and he chose to let you and your family push me out. That was his decision. This is mine. Her face hardened. "You will regret this." I stood and walked to the door. I opened it wide. "Leave my house." She glared at me. "You are weak. You cannot fight us. You never could." I met her eyes and spoke slowly. "You are wrong. You mistook kindness for weakness. Now you will learn the difference." She stormed out into the cold air without another word. I closed the door and turned the lock. My hands were steady. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The confrontation was over. But it was only the beginning. The following week the storm arrived. Not the one outside, the one they created. On a cold Sunday morning, I opened the newspaper with my coffee. My face was staring back at me from page 3. The headline read, "Local man abandons elderly couple at the airport." I read every word. Cody and Catherine Jenkins, Isabella's parents. They told the paper I had left them stranded in freezing weather. They said I was unstable. They painted me as a cruel old man who had turned his back on family. The story was filled with lies. The day they claimed was a winter storm had been bright and clear. They said I ignored their calls. The truth was, I had refused to play their servant any longer. None of that made it into print. I sat at the table and read the article again. Anger burned in my chest, but I kept my hands steady on the paper. They had gone public. They wanted to ruin me. They wanted the city to believe I was broken and bitter. By afternoon, the calls started. Old friends asking if the story was true, neighbors looking at me differently. Even some men from church kept their distance. Reputation in a small town is fragile. They knew that. That was their weapon. For a moment I felt the weight of it. I'd spent a lifetime building my name, honest work, long hours, providing for my family. Now all it took was one article for people to question everything. But then something shifted inside me. A quiet voice said, "They want you to hide. They want you to bend. Do not give them that victory." I pulled out the same folders I had studied before. Bank statements, receipts, checks, 5 years of sacrifice in black ink, evidence of every dollar I had given while they treated me like an outsider. I spread them across the table like cards in a game. They had chosen the battlefield. They wanted this war fought in the open. Very well. I began to organize. One folder for the mortgage, one for renovations, one for bills and extras. I added photos from Isabella's social media, her showing off jewelry, trips, dinners, all funded by me. Every post bragging about their life became a piece of evidence against them. As I worked, I felt something grow stronger in me. Not anger alone. Strategy. If they wanted to destroy my name, then I would show everyone the truth. Not with shouting, not with threats, but with facts, with proof. I closed the last folder and looked at Maria's picture. Her eyes seemed to watch me with calm approval. She had always believed in quiet justice. They had humiliated me in public. Soon it would be their turn. Christmas Eve came cold and grey. Families across the city were gathering at warm tables. Laughter filled houses while food filled ovens. My own house was quiet, but I was not alone. On the table before me lay 12 folders, each one filled with the truth. Bank statements, mortgage receipts, renovation bills, copies of Isabella's, posts showing off what I had paid for. Even the newspaper article, marked with notes in my own hand, lies circled in red, dates underlined. The full record of 5 years of sacrifice. I put on my best suit, the same one I had worn to Maria's funeral. Tonight I was not walking into a graveyard. I was walking into judgment. At 6:30 I drove to their neighborhood. The house glowed with lights. Cars filled the driveway. Guests gathered around the table inside. Through the window, I saw Isabella smiling with a glass of wine, Michael at her side, her parents seated at the head as if they owned the place. I parked across the street. My heart was steady. My hands did not shake. At 6:45, I carried the briefcase across the road and walked up the steps. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Their world was built on the belief that nothing could touch them. The sound of voices and silverware came from the dining room. I stepped inside. Conversation stopped when I appeared. 12 faces turned toward me. Some looked surprised, some looked frightened. "Good evening," I said. My voice was calm. "I hope you do not mind if I join you for a moment." Isabella rose from her chair. "Dennis, this is not the time. You need to leave." I set the briefcase on the sideboard and opened it. I pulled out the first folder and placed it in front of a guest. Then another and another, one by one until each person had the evidence before them. "These are the records of the payments I made," I said. 5 years of mortgage, renovations, bills, more than $200,000. All of it came from me. The room went silent, except for the sound of papers turning. Guests looked down. Their eyes widened as they saw the numbers. One man muttered, "This cannot be real." A woman across the table whispered, "He paid for all of this." Isabella's voice rose. "He volunteered. He wanted to help. He is twisting the story." I pulled out the copy of the newspaper article. And this is what they told the public. That I abandoned them at the airport, that I was unstable, that I was cruel. None of it true. I laid the article on the table. My notes in red showed each lie. Guests leaned forward. The silence grew heavier. "Ask yourselves," I said. "What kind of family takes a man's money, his sacrifice, his years, and then bans him from Christmas dinner? What kind of family smears his name when he finally says enough?" Michael's face was pale. His lips moved, but no words came. "Out." Isabella tried to speak again, but the room had turned. The guests were not looking at me now. They were looking at her parents, at the people who had lived in luxury on someone else's back. Catherine tried to protest. "This is a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "This is the truth." The weight of the room shifted. I saw it in the faces of the guests. Shock, disgust, pity. Not for me, for them. The perfect image they had built was cracking in real time. I closed the briefcase and straightened my tie. "Enjoy your dinner. It will be the last one I ever pay for." I turned and walked out. Behind me the voices rose, questions, accusations, the sound of a carefully built world collapsing. The cold air hit my face as I stepped outside, but for the first time in years I felt warm. After Christmas, everything began to unravel. The newspaper that had once printed their lies now carried whispers of another story. People at church and in the neighborhood had seen the evidence with their own eyes. The guests who sat at that table had spoken. Word spread fast. Cody Jenkins lost his seat at the country club board. Catherine stopped receiving invitations too. Her charity luncheons, the same friends who once praised their style, now avoided their calls. Respect they had spent years pretending to own was gone overnight. For Michael and Isabella the fall was even sharper. Without my payments the mortgage went unpaid. At first it was 1 month, then 2, then 3. A letter came in the mail. Notice of default. 14 days to pay $8,000 or face foreclosure. I set the letter aside. It was no longer my problem. Isabella left messages on my phone. Her voice shifted with each call. First sugar, then anger, then tears. I did not answer. Cody tried once too. His voice cracked with rage. He promised he would make me regret what I had done. I unplugged the phone and sat in silence. By March, their world was collapsing. The house that had been filled with lights and parties now sat dark at night. The new furniture they once showed off was listed quietly online. Neighbors who had once waved now looked at them with pity or scorn. And Michael, my son. He finally came to my door. His shoulders were slumped. His face was older. He had lost weight. The confidence was gone. "Dad," he said, standing in the doorway. "We need to talk." I stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the edge of the couch like a boy who had been sent to the principal. His voice was low. "I am sorry. For Christmas, for the way Isabella treated you, for the article, for all of it." I listened. I let him speak. His hands shook as he admitted what I had known all along. They had used me, they had laughed at me, they had counted on me never saying no. Tears filled his eyes. "The house is going into foreclosure. I do not know what to do." I leaned back in my chair. My voice stayed calm. "You figure it out, the same way I figured out how to live alone after your mother died, the same way I figured out how to survive when you shut me out. You are a grown man. Stand up and carry your own life." He dropped his head into his hands. For the first time, I saw the boy I once raised, not the man who had turned against me, the boy who once looked up at me for strength. "You have not lost me," I said finally. "You gave me away. There is a difference. If you want to build something with me now, it will have to start from nothing. With respect, with honesty, not with money." He nodded slowly, his face wet with tears. "I understand." I believed he did. The fall had been hard, but it had stripped away the lies, and what remained was the truth. They had taken my money. They had taken my place at their table, but they could not take my strength. That was mine again. Spring came slowly to Spokane. Snow melted from the roofs. Lawns turned green again. The city shook off the cold of winter, and I did the same. My house was not grand, but it was mine. With the first paycheck that was no longer drained by their mortgage, I fixed the porch light. I painted the walls. I bought new furniture for the living room. Simple things, modest things. But each one was a reminder. I was building a life for myself again. Michael came by once a week after that night on my couch. At first he came with excuses, then with apologies. Later he came with silence, just to sit across from me and share a cup of coffee. He had been humbled. For the first time in years I saw the man behind the pride, a man who might still change. Isabella did not come. She sent messages at first, then she stopped. Her parents vanished from their circles. Their names carried no weight anymore. They had lived on borrowed glory. Now they had nothing to borrow. One Sunday afternoon, Rosa, Maria's sister, invited me for dinner. I sat at her table with her children and grandchildren. They laughed. They asked me about my work, about the past, about stories I had never shared. I realized then that family is not only blood. Family is anyone who truly wants you at their table. As I drove home that evening, I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stepped onto the back porch. The sun was setting behind the hills. The air was cool but soft. I raised the glass toward Maria's picture in my mind. "I did it," I whispered. "I finally stood up, and I am free." The years of sacrifice were behind me. The chains I had placed on myself were gone. What lay ahead was mine to choose. Forgiveness had already come. But forgiveness did not mean going back. It meant starting fresh, on my own terms. That night I slept deeply, no weight on my chest, no silence pressing in, just the quiet strength of a man who had found his dignity again. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. In the end, true family is not the people who take from you. It is the ones who respect you and stand beside you. Sacrifice without respect is not love, it is chains, and sometimes the sweetest revenge is not anger, but freedom. In the end, true family is not the people who take from you, it is the ones who respect you, the ones who stand beside you. Sacrifice without respect is not love, it is chains. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is not anger, it is freedom. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.